Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is the ultimate Night Mage build. This is taking the Night Mage, buffing it up, and turning it into something absolutely phenomenal. Something that can do an incredible amount of damage and literally take down all the bosses in the game. We're on Journey 7 at this point. I'm around level 195. All the build info and stats are going to be at the end. But before we do that, we're going to go through a full boss guide, show you how much damage this can do, and it's absolutely insane. This is a fantastic build, and it's a ton of fun. So the first obvious benefit you'll see here is the fact that bosses, NPC invaders, anything that's not a human player is not going to avoid this. Even in PvP, this actually works for a lot of people because it's hard to see coming as well, but obviously human players can dodge it. As far as bosses in the game though, they're not going to dodge this. Even Malenia, who usually dodges pretty much everything you throw at her, not dodging this. And it does a really good amount of damage. What we're using here is the dual staves of loss. We have two of these. You get one per playthrough in Caelid. If you can't get a second one on your first playthrough, you can get it on your second playthrough, or have a friend drop it for you. There's a ton of forums and things like that where you can get the second one. But the second one's really important because that gives us a total of 60% more damage by wielding two of these. First up is Margit of the main game bosses, and he absolutely gets obliterated by this. This is on New Game Plus 6. I'm level 195. I think I mentioned that before. And yeah, absolutely completely obliterated by Night Comet. Just 3 of them, and he goes down with ease. This is effective against all the bosses in the game. I'm going to show you some of the late game bosses. You have to see how quickly this obliterates them. It really is honestly awesome to use. It does a ton of damage and it's an absolute blast. As you can tell, Godfrey here, much like Margit, not able to take the ridiculous amount of damage. We throw down Terra Magika. We have the magic tear. The Godfrey Icon, as mentioned before, show you the entire build at the end. But yeah, the damage is unreal. Absolutely obliterates him, and goodbye Godfrey. The first 2 bosses are always easy, but even easier when you're using something like this. Then we have the Magma Worm, who technically is not a main game boss, but I wanted to show you how much damage it did. I did a couple extra buffs for him. I ended up dying the first time, but then the second time I went in there and absolutely obliterated him, simply because he kept running me over the first time when I was trying to throw down Terra Magika and do a bunch of damage to him, trying to get headshots because he does take additional damage to the head. Again, not totally mandatory, but if you go this way, and this is the route that I generally end up going because I just go north when I'm at the lakes, that's where I end up, and we end up defeating him without much of an issue. Now Radahn. Radahn is always somewhat difficult to solo. No matter what journey you're on, and we're on 7 at this point, he has not a ton of HP, but kind of just enough HP and just enough damage to be a problem for a lot of builds. Well, let me tell you this. He's not a problem for our Night Mage. This is one of the most powerful mage builds I've ever used that doesn't specialize in something like Comet, Azure, or Meteorite of Astal. Obviously, you can still use those, but some players get bored of them, and they're hard to set up, and they're really stationary. So for this, we just use Night Comet, absolutely blast him with it. You can tell the damage is really, really good, even though by the time we got to him, a couple of the buffs ran out. It ultimately does not matter. He takes a ton of damage, ends up going down fairly quickly, and once again, showing off this build is insane. This whole Night Mage thing, especially with the buffs you can do, is absolutely fantastic. So the Draconic Tree Sentinel, this was a joke. This honestly, I thought this was going to be a little bit different because I figured, this is Journey 7 or whatever. We're on New Game Plus 6. He's got a lot of HP and resistances. Yeah, it did not matter at all. With the buff system we're using that I'm going to show you at the end, the whole setup I have, including the stats at the end of the video, the damage we're doing is ridiculous. I mean, this build is fantastic. Using the dual staves of loss for the 60% boost before buffs, that's 60% before we do any buffs, is actually, it's got to be one of the best mage builds I've ever used. It's awesome. It's so much fun, and it does a ton of damage. As you can see with Morgott here, he did kill me the first time when he appears on top of you after the scene, but that's okay. I wanted to be able to set up and all that, so once I was set up, he took a ton of damage, didn't even get to phase 2, and goodbye Morgott. Next up, the Fire Giant. Now, for the Fire Giant, I wanted to throw in the Moon to debuff him. Since he's got 0 magic resistance, I figure might even lower that further with the Moon. It stacks with everything else, so I figured going to use this a couple of times. The Moon gives 10% additional magic damage when you use it for a minute, and it stacks with everything else. After we did that, he takes a ridiculous amount of damage. Nearly phases by just a couple of comets, and wait till you see this. This is probably one of the easiest and most effective ways to kill the Fire Giant in the late game. It's got around 60,000 HP, and he absolutely gets obliterated by Night Comet. It is a phenomenal build, and it's awesome. Now that we've shown the damage, the extreme amount of damage that it could do to something as large as the Fire Giant with 60,000 HP, we move on to the Godskin duo. For these guys, of course, we're going to go with sleeping pots because we want to get them to sleep so we can do as much damage as possible, and also so that we can buff this and kind of use this as a build because it goes really well with buffs. After they're put to sleep, the damage is really good. It does incredible damage when charged with the Godfrey Icon, the dual staves of lost, the entire build, the whole setup with buffs. Howl of Shabribri now lasting 40 seconds instead of 20, give us an extra 25%, 35% if you proc the Black Dumpling before. By the way, this Glinstone crown, I just keep it on for style. Doesn't boost anything, but I just like it because I've always had it on my Mage character. So I kind of stuck with it and kept it there. But yeah, that's just something of note. Generally speaking, I use and proc the Black Dumpling for the bonus damage. And goodbye, Godskin duo. Not a mandatory boss, but if you don't want him hitting you in the back, I decided to go at this Draconic Tree Sentinel. Figured I'd hit him with the debuff first, because this one's got a lot more health than the other one. I think it's got around 5,000 or more HP, and as you can tell, once again, we absolutely shred him. He disappears fairly quickly. Not a difficult build to take him down. Don't have to worry about him hitting us in the back, which is the main reason why I always end up killing him. Now, all the things we've done in the game so far with Night Comet, this is probably the most impressive to me. The amount of damage and also sustainability and the fact that you can kind of just roll around with these guys and go toe-to-toe with them with Beast Clergyman and Malekith, this thing is fantastic against them. It does a high amount of damage. They don't have a ton of HP to begin with, and guess what? Malekith's not going to avoid it. He's going to take the full amount of damage, and he gets absolutely obliterated. It wasn't even close. He's completely destroyed by it. One of the best builds probably to use against them in this fight. Works fantastically, and it's consistent. Now, I don't usually show Gideon, but this was kind of funny anyway. I just threw him in here. There's really not a lot of explanation that needs to go with Gideon. He kind of just stands there with his monologue, so you're always going to hit him with it. I think he goes down in like 2 comets. Not a difficult fight whatsoever. Gideon kind of disappears most of the time anyway, since his monologue goes around forever. And you can kill him very quickly in his monologue, which makes it very, very easy, and probably one of the easiest boss fights in the entire game. Now for Godfrey. Godfrey is a little bit more annoying. You don't want to get him to the point where he does his stomps. You want to be able to damage him and destroy him before that. And then in his second phase, take a step back, charge one, try to get as many hits as you can out of him. If the buffs are still active, which I believe they were for me, you're going to do a ton of damage and he's going to go down very quickly. Once again, not a hard boss with this build. So the final 2 bosses of the game, that's where things kind of get a little bit hairy with this build. Radagon, completely easy, had no problems with him. I did die to Elden Beast a few times. Elden Beast, 40% magic resistance, and the fact that he generally just has so much HP. The fight kind of went on for a while. I ended up editing it a little bit, but yeah, there was a lot of running around. Works great for Radagon. As far as Elden Beast, though, it's kind of just okay against him. There's other things that you can use like Comet Azure or Meteorite of Astal that'll completely obliterate him, or something like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Yeah, this kind of goes on for a little bit, so it's just the way it is with him. He's kind of one of those things where, you know, on Journey 7 at this point, he's probably got about 30,000 HP with 40% damage reduction in magic, damage resistance rather. So it makes everything very difficult. And he does take good damage from it, but there's just some better ways of beating him up, and strength weapons in particular can do a lot of poise damage. Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, Comet Azure, and Meteorite of Astal can all obliterate him entirely. Even so, this build still works against him, it's just not as effective as the rest of the bosses. And dodging is something that you're going to have to do if you use this build, because it's not going to obliterate him in just a couple of hits. Even on base game or new game plus, it's going to do more damage there because he's going to have like 10,000 less HP. But in the instance of this, I ended up finding myself dodging a lot, having to go through Elden Stars, having to go through all the holy-like motions that he does. And I edited this a little bit to kind of make it shorter and put everything together. Overall, though, as you can tell, he's pretty much the ultimate spam machine. Even so, we did enough damage, we had plenty of FP for the fight, and everything ended up going our way in the end. Yeah, it's amazing the differences too, like in Elden Beast. When you look at how everything else is in the entirety of Elden Ring, and then you look at Elden Beast is almost like a stamina check. That's literally kind of what he is as a boss fight. Kind of checks and makes sure that, you know, you have enough stamina to roll with him or HP or whatever. It's just a long duration fight in a lot of instances, and it goes on, in my opinion, a little bit too long. I'm not a big fan of the final boss. I've mentioned that before on my channel. I'm not a huge fan of it. Radagon's really cool, but when it comes to Elden Beast, he just feels, I don't know, kind of a little bit of a letdown for what's a fantastic game, and ends up being kind of a weird, awkward stamina check boss fight at the end of the game. This is a really fun build though, and even though it does struggle a little bit with Elden Beast on the later journeys, it's still a fantastic build that can obliterate the majority of bosses in Elden Ring. Overall, this was a really fun run. This was a run that I honestly had a blast with. I really kind of enjoyed it. I was actually down at the moment. I have a whole history of like stomach issues and stuff that I don't want to get into that most of my channel knows about, and had like a flare up of sorts and stuff the past week, so I've been having some difficulties with that. It's been a rough week, and then I did this run, and it turned out it was a lot of fun. This was a really, really fun run, and it was absolutely fantastic, and I had a good time. It was one of the best times that I've had with Elden Ring in the past couple of months because it's so highly buffable. I didn't really know about it. Somebody commented on my channel. I figured I'd give it a try. Ended up giving it a try, and I really enjoyed it. This is a fantastic build to buff with the 60% boost from both staves. So this is the build that I used. We have dual staves of loss. We have the weathered straight sword or seppuku if you want to low health proc any seal, black dumpling, Godfrey Icon, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords, Talisman, and the Red Feathered Branch Sword if you need it, the Graven Mask Talisman, and the Magic and Defense Tear. This is a late game build. These are my stats at 195 on Journey 7, New Game plus 6. If you want to work your way back to 150 though, you can get INT back to 60, Mine back to 30, kind of move stuff around a little bit. It is doable. And while we have the stats up, if you're not subbed to my channel, definitely hit that subscribe button if you want more content like this. I do a ton of overpowered PvE builds. There's just a ton of great builds on there. Definitely hit that subscribe button. Go and check those out. You're honestly going to love it. It's fantastic for PvE. The buffing system at the end here, we're just procking the black dumpling. We're using things like Golden Vow, Drinking Our Flask, Howl of Shabribri. You can see the entire order here, and then we cast Terra Magika, and then we're going to be using the Night Comet in Terra Magika with all the buffs for massive damage, and the damage, as you saw already, is fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this helps you obliterate all the bosses in PvE. There's a ton of great builds on my channel, so definitely hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys there.